Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today we're continuing our series on how to start a nation by discussing a nation's territory. So this is an area where a lot of genuine aspirant nations really do struggle. And how you define your territory really does determine a lot about your nation, not least in how your government is structured, how you operate, what the day-to-day operations of your nation is going to look like. And that's why I wanted to cover this particular topic before I delved into government structures, because there are going to be videos covering the government of your nation. There are going to be videos as to what you should consider and what you should not consider going forward. But ultimately, it is down to territory in terms of how far you go with this and which direction that you take. And so, as I say, I just want to take a moment to go over the territory of your nation before tackling other matters concerning this nation building project that you may have going. Now, one of the biggest problems that I've seen from people, from aspirant nation builders, is that they believe that they need the territory, they need the land in place right from the start. And this is not true. You can work up to it. You can build your community first. You can put everything in place. You can get all your ducks in a row and then acquire the territory. This is certainly something that Stomaria itself has done, and a lot of other nations and nation building projects have done as well. So don't feel pressured into simply claiming random territory, because ultimately this is what you will end up doing. If you cannot acquire territory through legal and legitimate means, land that you have some genuine control and authority over, people tend to think outside the box, and this leads to a damage in terms of people's perception of you. And I want to give a few examples of why this is the case. For instance, you'll have some people that claim their parents' back garden. You'll have some people that claim their bedroom. You'll have some people that claim their local public park. You'll have some people that will claim their town, a city, a continent. You'll have some people that claim random uninhabited islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. You'll have some people that claim the moon or another planet. You'll have some people that go further and claim fictional planets and fictional realms. You'll have some people that claim land in Minecraft servers. The list goes on and on and on. But something that all of these claims have in common is that you do not have genuine control and ownership of it. You cannot utilize this land, these territories that are being claimed, to advance your goals, to promote your values, and to accomplish your objectives. And this is fundamentally the problem here, because unless you have private freehold land, then nothing else really matters, because you don't have any jurisdiction over any of this territory that you've claimed. So what you've got to do is very simple. You've got to work your way up to acquiring it. And there are various ways to go about this. But before I delve into that too much, I do want to reiterate why it's important that it needs to be private freehold land. Three particular words that people will know Stomaria for in particular, in the sense that we have promoted this since day one. Private freehold land. It's very important. So when I talk about private, I'm talking about land that is actually yours. You do not need your friend's permission, your parents' permission, your neighbour's permission to utilise this land. There will be rules and laws and regulations as to what you can and can't do with this land, depending on what kind of land it is and what the local authority is in your particular area. And then we get onto the question of sovereignty, which I will cover in another video. But by and large, you want to make sure that as few people as possible are involved in the prevention of the utilisation of this land. So even though the authorities might say you can't do this, you can't do that, there's not much you can do about it. You can challenge it or whatever else, but ultimately the authorities will likely have the final say. But you don't want to have to go through the authorities and your parents and your friends and your neighbours and your neighbourhood as to what you can do with this land. So it is the least complicated way to go about acquiring territory in that sense. When I talk about freehold, this is land that you actually own. The property that the land is on, you actually own. And this stands in contrast, for instance, to a leasehold property, where, for instance, if you have a home, a flat, or even a house on a particular plot, if it is a leasehold, you are only renting that land. You are only renting that property. You do not own the land that the buildings are sat on. And that is the fundamental difference. It is basically the equivalent of renting. And if you're trying to establish a real world community, it's very hard to try to justify to your supporters, to your citizens, that the leasehold building that you have acquired is going to be the site of your new civilization. Because ultimately, you can't even justifiably say that the land that you're building this on is even yours, because it isn't. You are literally renting the land if it is not freehold. And so this is another fundamental important characteristic of the land search, of the territory search that you should be doing. You want to be looking for freehold land. And when I talk about land, I'm talking about something that you can actually access, something you can visit, something you can actually utilize and bring people to. It's no good simply claiming a fictional planet. It's no good simply claiming a public park. It's no good simply claiming a random island in the Pacific. Because ultimately, if you're looking to establish a real world community, if you're looking to establish a civilization, you want to be able to bring people there. And people aren't going to want to be uprooted and moved into the middle of this desolate island in the middle of nowhere with no connection or association with the outside world. As much as a lot of people think they might want that, I think they will come to regret it quite quickly once they realise that the ability to get on and off these sorts of places would be near impossible. Not least because there is no such thing, as far as I'm aware, as an unclaimed island in any part of the world. Every scrap of land by one or two places which are known about but simply not claimed are already claimed. So you would be wasting your time claiming these islands. You want land that you can access, land that you can utilize, land that you can bring people to, and actually show people that you're capable of building something there. And that is ultimately what people are going to be looking for. When you are building your nation, when you are building your community, the first thing people are going to ask is, well, what have you done? Have you done anything beyond suggesting your plans for the future, what you intend to do for the future? Or are you going to be able to show them what you are doing? And that is the fundamental difference between those that have private freehold land and those that are simply claiming whatever else. Now, while there is an undeniable logic in how we go about acquiring territory and what we should claim as territory from our own standpoint, not a lot of people actually do this. Not a lot of people take this path. And the reason for this is very simple. It is quite difficult to do. Now, depending on where you are in the world, land can be quite inaccessible and quite expensive. And it's for this reason that people go down the route of simply claiming territory rather than putting in the effort to actually purchase it. And this is where the mistake comes from. This is where the divide starts to appear. Because in order to acquire private freehold land, for most people, if you are looking to do that for yourself, I'm not talking about claiming your parents' land or your friend's land or your neighbour's land. I'm talking about land that you own. In order to do that, you need to put in a lot of time and a lot of work in order to acquire it. And a lot of people simply don't have that kind of commitment to the nation that they're building. And this is one of the ways that we can tell how serious someone is about building a nation and a community in their own right. If they understand that they need private freehold land in order to accomplish their goals, then they will work towards that. If they don't genuinely believe in the success and the future of their own nation and their own community, then of course they're just going to claim a random island somewhere, because then they have nothing to lose if it goes belly up. And the odds are, if they are just claiming random plots of land in the world or in outer space or whatever else, then the odds are that they are just generally not looking to last long into the future. They don't have a vision in mind that goes beyond just suggesting plans for the future, suggesting hypothetical situations in which they might be able to do this or could do that in 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 years' time or whatever else. But there's no drive to do something in the moment. There's no drive to establish something genuine and something real in the immediate term. And that's what a lot of people, I think, are actually looking for. They are looking for nations, looking for entities, looking for communities that are striving to do something now. And if not now, then certainly in the near future. And they want to see people taking steps towards that end. But as I say, sometimes it can be difficult to do. And for us, it took a lot longer than even we would have liked. So we were actually founded in June 2019, and we were founded as Stomaria and the Empire of Stomaria, and we sort of built up from there. And we had this plan to buy private freehold land. Now, unfortunately, in June 2019, we only had a solid 6-8 months to ourselves before a certain global pandemic hit, and that took out a few years of our time as we focused on other things. And then obviously we had Princess Eleanor in 2020, then we moved home in 2021. So there was a lot going on in my own life, which did delay the purchase of private freehold land longer than I would have liked. But I always kept up the intention, kept up the message, if you like, that acquiring this land was the end goal. This was important. And even during these years in which we went from the foundation of Stomaria to the actual acquisition of the land, I was never tempted, and you should never be tempted, to simply say, nuts to this, let's just claim the local park and be done with it, and then we have that territory, because it doesn't mean anything. It's pointless, and it will damage your image in the long run. If people come across your nation, your society, your civilization, and you go, okay, so what have you built? And you go, well, nothing, because the public park is owned by the local council and they won't let us do anything with it. Oddly enough, you can't go out there and start planting potatoes or chopping down trees or whatever else, because it's not your land. And this is something that I try to reiterate time and time again. It needs to be private freehold land. Otherwise, it's just a pointless endeavor. But then you might say, well, maybe there's another way of doing it, because there is a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of energy that has to go in if one person is buying all of the land. And I completely sympathize with this. This is the reason that it took us so long to do, because ultimately it was just myself and, of course, Samantha that was working towards the acquisition of this land, which was going to be allocated to Stomaria. It is effectively our gift to the Stomarian community. We worked to be able to provide land which can be utilized to advance our common goals. But there is obviously alternative routes to this. So one of the suggestions and one of the practices that some people do promote or engage in is the idea that you can get 10, 20, 30 people, 100 people, it doesn't matter, the numbers are irrelevant, and you will all put in a particular amount of funds into a pot, and then that pot gets used to purchase the land, because then obviously you can do it a lot quicker. If there are people as dedicated as you are to making this happen and they've got funds available, you don't need as much upfront capital yourself in order to acquire that land. And in theory, that is a good way to go about it, because you are collectively as a community putting funds in and you are buying a plot of land, and you are going to be able to utilize that land in a way that's going to advance your nation's goals. However, the problem comes with the fact, a long tried and tested fact, that where there is people, there's politics, and where there's politics, there are problems. So let's say hypothetically there are 10 people who are committed to building a nation and a community, and they find a plot of land, 100 acres for £100,000. So they each put in £10,000 and they all become joint owners of this property. They all have an equal share of this property. And on paper, that's fantastic. It's great. They have established their nation, they are establishing a community, and they're really starting to build something. But after a few weeks, months, or even years, a couple of the people, they decide it's just really not for them and they want out. So what do? Do you have to buy them out? Do you fence off their land and have a gentleman's agreement? Do they legally have to go through the process of having that land sold separately, their 10 acres, their share of that plot? Does that just get carved out of the land in some way? Because one way or the other, that's going to be something that you need to consider. People will drop out, people will lose interest, and people will need compensation for that in some form or another. And the other, obviously, problem that comes with that is that you could have the 8 remaining people going in different directions in terms of their objectives, their ideology, their actual purpose. You might get 2 or 3 people that decide that they want to establish a communist dystopia. You might get 2 or 3 other people that want to establish a monarchy. You might get another 2 people who want to set up a republic with very liberal values. So what happens? There's never going to be any consensus. There's never going to be any agreement with these kind of conflicting ideals, which may have been present at the start of the actual purchase of the land, or may have developed over time, but the results are the same either way. People will be pulled apart, and the land and the territory will be pulled apart. The actual physical territory of the nation will start to disintegrate until it is effectively nothing. It just boils all the way back down to 10 individual bickering people. Now, this is obviously a drastic example, but it is a perfectly possible scenario, and it only gets more complicated the more people you add into the mix. Say it wasn't 10 people, say it was 100 people or 1,000 people, then it just becomes infinitely more complicated. And this is where the idea that the government structure of your nation, for nations and entities such as ours, on the scale that we are doing this, it makes sense to go down a monarchist route of some sort. And I am going to make a video about this another time. But fundamentally, this is one of the main reasons for it, because you want someone with total control over the entire territory. So if there are disagreements, if there are fallings out, it does not impact the territorial integrity of the nation. And that is fundamentally one of the most important factors of your nation building project. People, citizens, your supporters, they will come and go. There will be some die-hard, long-term supporters that will stand the test of time. But a lot of people will be in and they will be out. They will be just rotating, depending on how they got along with other people, and depends on which direction your nation takes in terms of its values and objectives and its progress. People's interest in your community, it'll waver and it'll be re-energized over time in a sort of ebb and flow kind of situation. It happens, and the only thing that you really have consistent control over is the physical territory, is the land that you acquire. If it is private freehold land that you own, it will remain that way until you decide that you no longer want it. And that is fundamentally the difference between acquiring private freehold land for yourself and getting other people to purchase it with you, because there is a risk in that. And that is just something to think about. Now, I think at this point I've probably waffled on long enough about the question of territory, and I hope it has given some people a few ideas, if they haven't already considered them, about how they should go about acquiring territory, the ways in which they can go about acquiring territory, and why you should acquire the kinds of territory that we're talking about, in that we're talking about private freehold land. So while I hope you have enjoyed this video and you have gotten some value out of it, if you want to become a part of the Stomarian community, you can do so through our Patreon campaign, the link of which I shall leave in the description below as always. But otherwise, if you did enjoy this video, then please feel free to give it a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.